Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Bad Jew, the place where there's no such thing as a bad Jew. This particular episode is going to be especially tasty, so please get your challah out. Get ready for some good, tasty information, because with us today is Sarah Klegman. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. How have you been?
Thank you, Chaz. I'm good. Very excited to get into the challah with you. I'm ready. I'm sorry. That's
Oh, okay. I know
Sorry.
you're filled with dad jokes today. So, all right. But the right of entry onto the podcast is the 4-minute Bad Jew challenge. You got to tell your life story in 4 minutes. I'm going to put you on a 4-minute timer. Are you ready?
I mean, I feel like this is when people try to read like Who Knows One all in one breath. But yeah, I got ready because if I didn't practice on the rails, I would go off them. So yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. It's time. Yalla.
Okay, I am a Jewish, queer, hearing impaired, neurodiverse writer and recovered C-level executive. I grew up in Michigan with my mom and my dad and my big sister. After high school, I moved to Chicago and I studied screenwriting and producing, mostly focused in the world of comedy. When I graduated, I moved to Los Angeles and I started working at a comedy production company where I would eventually become a talent manager and producer. It was a lot of storytelling, a lot of understanding audiences and growth strategy, which was very cool and very fun and very conducive to burnout. Which I did at 25. So I left entertainment and I transitioned to the startup world where I developed skills with branding and building brand voices. And I met all kinds of artists and entrepreneurs. After that, I branched out and became a freelance writer and consultant, helping companies build their brand voices and identities. And throughout all of this, here's the challah comes in. I would bake challah for friends, colleagues, events. And somewhere around 2012, 2013, I met Alina, who would become my challah baking partner. And together we experimented with recipes. We created an Instagram that got a decent following. And we organized challah tastings and events. We even collaborated with BuzzFeed to make a cool challah braiding video and Uber to deliver challah across Los Angeles. And then I started working more with Jewish organizations like At the Well and the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles and some cool Jewish small businesses. And at 27, I got hearing aids and I began advocating for hearing impairment awareness. And also around that time, I had a podcast called What's Wrong With You, where I interviewed successful people about their flaws and failures. And I did live podcast taping, storytelling, celebrating workshops at Jewish learning festivals around the world. And then in 2021, I fell madly in love with my husband, an incredible, dreamy trans man named Charlie, who is a soldier in the U.S. Army Reserves. And we moved to Sacramento with our giant dog, who will hopefully be quiet during this recording. And then back in 2019, I had joined a startup full time, eventually becoming our chief happiness officer. Yes, that's a real title. And then after 5 years there, I was growing into becoming one of the faces of the company. And then October 7th happened. And I realized that if I was the face of a company, I wouldn't be able to talk about issues that are important to me without the risk of it impacting the company. So last year, I decided it was time to move on. Oh my God, at this 10 seconds. I needed a rest. And I took about a year off. And I want my superpowers now to be used for Jewish community organizations, which is where we are now. Did I do it, Chaz?
Yes, but you still have 50 seconds if you still want.
Oh my God, I'm looking at the wrong timer. Okay, well, I can just start telling you about my dreams and wishes and hopes. No. Yeah, last year, I decided that it was time to move on from the startup space. And that when I came back to the world, I really, like I said, I wanted my superpowers to be used in the Jewish world. So I started working again with At the Well and other like Jewish owned businesses and friends. And so that's really where I'm at now. So it was kind of kismet that you reached out. And yeah, I'm just excited to be diving back into the world. I think challah has always been a part of who I am and my family and my upbringing. And I just love putting carbohydrates in people's faces.
Love it. And I think that's the best slogan you can possibly have. I put carbohydrates in your face.
Yeah.
People will love that. No, but you nailed the 4-minute bad Jew challenge. That was awesome. Really, really incredibly happy to have you on the show. Okay, so here's the thing. There's so many breads out there, right? If I'm curious, Sarah, if you were to choose any type of bread that wasn't challah as your favorite bread, what would it be?
Ooh, I would say like a nice like sourdough.
I was gonna say that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a sourdough.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, that being said, I actually have been to Shabbats where they have served sourdough at the table. That was always served alongside with challah.
I was gonna say in addition to challah, not
In addition to challah, it was never by itself, right?
Yeah.
That being said, challah is a centerpiece to, as well as the upcoming holiday Rosh Hashanah, right? But before we get to Rosh Hashanah, we're gonna focus solely on Shabbat here for a second. I just never understood. I've always just taken it for granted, right? Why is challah the bread, right? It could be anything, right? We left Egypt with without the ability to have leavened bread. So why wasn't it matzah? You know, like there's so many reasons why it could have been any other bread. So why challah? Why do we land on challah?
I mean, with most Jewish rituals, traditions, food, we're just a sucker for symbolism, right? Bonus points if it's also delicious. So there's, again, like many sort of Jewish like histories, ideas, Jewish wisdom. What is that saying? It's like 2 Jews, 4 opinions.
Yeah.
So when it comes to challah, some folks might say it represents like the manna that fell from the sky when we were wandering around and didn't know where we were going. Sort of gift from God in that sense. There was a not like full on commandment, but we were called and asked to give bread as sort of an offering to God back in Torah days. And then that eventually turned into giving bread to like the holy men. But challah as we know it today didn't really enter the Jewish universe until I think like the 15th century. And now it's, delicious and definitely much more widespread. Who doesn't love a good challah French toast at their local deli? But yeah, there's a lot of different, like I said, symbolism. If you see a challah with 12 strands, that's like, representing like the 12 tribes of Israel. And when you see like 3 strands, I think that can be like representing, I'm going to totally butcher this, but it's like God's love for the Jewish people and like 2 other things. So there's a lot of different history, but depending on where you are in the world, there's like slight variations to like what challah is and what it means. But it essentially is the centerpiece, like you said, of like literally of every Shabbat table. And yeah, that's sort of like the brief history of like what the heck is challah and where did it come from.
That's so interesting. Wait, so you're saying that, going back to, because you brought up a date here for a second, I found it really curious. You're saying in the 15th century is when we started the challah tradition?
Yeah. So like the challah tradition as we know it today. So like it essentially, I even took notes because I was like, you're going to ask me this. So it didn't really happen. It was like around the 15th century and it was primarily in like Ashkenazi communities. But I'm not exactly sure like of the perfect origin. I think, like I said, just the nature of me traveling around the world talking about challah, there's some like baseline challah trivia that I need to know. I would say I have expert level in challah baking and challah eating.
Sure.
But when it comes to like challah history, I have a decent amount of knowledge, but pretty much just enough to give you a nugget and then distract you with delicious bread.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Enough. Well, I'm wishing that this interview wasn't virtual, but you're somewhere in the Midwest right now, right?
Well, that's where I was. I grew up in Michigan, but right now I'm in Sacramento.
You're in Sacramento. Okay, got it. So I'm going to fly up there
Yes,
for Los
please.
Angeles.
You're
I want to
welcome.
be distracted by bread. Okay, got it. So, okay. So that's super interesting. So the Ashkenazis really started in the 15th century. Now we have challah today. Do you know if challah back then that looked like challah today?
I don't think so, because it originally was just supposed to be like an offering, like in the same way that, so like to make kosher challah these days, you need to take off a piece and burn it. And then I think like biblical times, you started with just like giving bread as an offering to God. And then it turned into giving bread to the holy men. And then it turned into burning. So the sort of braided, like the braiding part, I think that originated in Germany in like the 1400s.
Really?
Yeah. And it was, here we go. I found the right part of my notes. It originated from local non-Jewish braided breads that were, oh my God, I'm going to try and say this German word. And my partner in Challah, she's German, so she's going to listen to this and laugh at me. It's like Hirsch's blood or like Persch's blood. I don't know. But it was. It eventually spread to like other like Ashkenazi and Jewish communities around the world. But yeah, I think Germany is where the sort of braided part came from. And then, of course, the Jewish world latched onto it and was like, let's add symbolism to all the foods we eat.
Sure.
Yeah.
What is your favorite piece of symbolism that can be learned from just the design of the challah alone?
Oh. So we have a little bit of a debate going when it comes to like, are you a challah cutter or are you a challah ripper? Right? Like, do you cut it or you just rip it off? And I used to be like adamant. I'm like, I am a cutter. Like, yes, I'll rip it off when we do the original blessing, but if I want a piece of challah, I want a nice, neat, tidy slice. Give me a slice. But there is something wonderful about the braids and about you got these different challah lumps and people can go in and they can grab it. So I think the idea of it being something that everyone takes part in and something that brings people together, I absolutely love. I also love the possibilities of symbolism and intentionality with the strands. So yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, cool. So you can totally create this amazing, so you can extrapolate a lot of amazing like community building from the idea of challah, where it's like we're all interwoven and cutting, it's neater, right? You're slicing through with a tool that was made specifically for it, right? Very little mess when you're doing so. Yeah. And because of that, you get this nice organized process of process through the challah itself, right?
Yeah.
However, for the other aspect of it, for tearing it apart with your hands, which sounds savage by itself, it's like, but like the community is actually getting together and like participating, getting their not getting their hands dirty, but like almost like they're putting in the effort. You're more likely to create a meet cute, essentially, right? Over challah, and that's.
Oh my God, I love that. To be reaching at the same time. Oh, what was this your piece?
So yeah,
I just love like what you said about like community. Like, if there's like 15 odd million of us in the world right now, something like that. Yeah, and like, so if you think of if the average family size is like 3.5 people, and let's see if only like half of those people have challah every Shabbat, then we're still looking at like more than 2 million, if my math is right, people around the world with challah on the table, and that's been happening for thousands of years or hundreds, long time. It's a long ass time. I think that's really beautiful. Is that it's the sort of thing, especially now, that really, really brings us all together, even though it looks different in different parts of the world. Pretty much every Shabbat table will have a challah on it.
I think that's pretty beautiful that the 15 million. Now, there's not going to be 15 million Shabbat tables because Shabbat serves more than one table it's one person per table. But like, you have all these challahs being served at these different Shabbat tables, and it's being done the same exact way across the entire globe, which is amazing. By a population of under 15 million, it's pretty amazing. What are we going to say?
No, I was going to say, so it's interesting. It is like challah, and people do that sort of blessing over the bread. But there's some Sephardic communities that might use like pita, or like Indian Jews might use naan. But
do they really?
Yeah. From
Okay.
like, hopefully if there's any like Indian or like Yemenite Jews also, like I would say reach out to Chaz and tell them what your challah is. And see, because like, everyone, from what I can tell in my attempt at becoming at least a temporary challah historian, um, there's, slight variations, but for the most part, when you say challah to any Jewish person in the world, they're going to picture that braided loaf of deliciousness.
Totally. And I'm thinking about it now as well. It's like, a lot of breads just kind of come out as a loaf, as like a flat loaf where there's not any braids in it. Challah, I mean, can you even imagine if challah just came in a random ass loaf like that? It wouldn't have the same. There's something different about it. It just doesn't feel right as I'm saying it out loud, right?
Yeah, well, because it's just a loaf of bread. It's
Right.
like what's a good carbohydrate without symbolism? At least when it comes to Jewish tables. Pretty much like every holiday we have is either like food is like central or the lack of food is central, which is usually followed by intentional lots of food. So anytime we can add more meaning, history, storytelling to our Jewish table, that's really what we always try to do for the most part.
And bread does play a central role. I mean, the three holidays I think of when it comes to bread and Judaism is Passover with matzah, which matzah is like good the first night and then it sucks after that.
It's not holiday. Yeah.
It's not all that great,
Yeah.
right? And then when it comes to, there's Shabbat every single week. If you do a Shabbat on Passover, a double holiday, you're still having matzah. You don't get to have a break just for the Shabbat, right? And then of course there's Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah has a instead a different design for it has a circular design for challah. I would love to learn a little bit about that as well. Why is it circular for Rosh Hashanah?
Why is it circular? It represents like the sort of cycle of the whole year, right? Some people say it's like the world, but most when you do a little bit of looking into it or ask your local rabbi, most of it has to do with representing like the completion of the cycle of the year. And then of course, if you're lucky and you can get your hands on a Rosh Hashanah round challah that is stuffed with apples, it's like double the symbolism. You got that sweetness of the new year. You got a fun round challah. But yeah, that's Rosh Hashanah challah. And we for the challah company, Challah Hub, that we had, it actually, my business partner Alina, like around Rosh Hashanah, she's like, oh, like we could put cool stuff into challah, like apples and things like that. And that kind of was one of the things that started our challah adventure. What is Challah Hub? And we just started being like, well, what else can we put into challah? Like, what other weird stuff can we put into challah? So we started putting like, first started out with just like chocolate chips. And then it became like we did like a whiskey toffee challah. We did like a s'mores challah. We did a mint chocolate chip challah, which was green. And upon hearing it, everyone's like, that sounds weird. And then you try it and you're like, holy crap, this is delicious and confusing, but I want more of it.
I would never, I did not, I woke up this morning not expecting to hear that sentence.
Most people don't. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Chocolate mint challah. Okay. I mean, you know what the craziest challah I ever had was so say I'm not sure you know this about me. My audience, some of them know this about me. I'm vegan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm vegan. My friend one time came over and she was also vegan and she brought over a pepperoni pizza challah. By the way, this is completely kosher because the pepperoni was a soy-based pepperoni from certified by the OU, by the Orthodox Union, right? And we dipped it. We just had like this amazing challah, and we tore it and we dipped it in tomato sauce to have that pizza taste.
Oof.
Oh, I cannot. Like insane how good that was probably like one of the best challahs outside my mom's challah. My mom also does the flavor of challah very differently, by the way. Most challahs are sweet or even kind of like more on the neutral sweet side. My mom's challah my favorite challah, by the way. Shout out to Lori Volk here.
Mhm.
She makes an incredible savory garlic herb challah.
Oh yeah.
And the best is like after you're done stuffing your face with the challah, because I could probably eat that in one night if I
Hmm.
wanted to, in one Shabbat, right?
Hmm.
The best and worst thing is like afterwards, you just smell the grease, the garlic grease in your fingers, and it makes you want more.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's the best. It really is the best, Sarah. I can't explain it.
We did a turmeric everything challah, which is absolutely delicious. But our like original Challah Hub challah is vegan, and everyone, because when we first started Challah Hub, so I was vegan for like 2 years,
Okay.
and that was right around the time that we started Challah Hub. So Alina and I started with like egg bread, and then I was like, hey, I'm gonna be vegan, so we need to find a delicious vegan recipe, and we did a lot of testing. But the vegan recipe is on the Challah Hub website, which is still available for perusing, even though we're no longer doing Challah Hub for now. And yeah, our original challah is technically vegan, and
Wow.
yeah. And my other like weird, delicious challah flavor is like the jalapeno cheese, like the
Ooh,
jalapeno
okay.
chip. And then you
Okay.
get the fun out of it. I want to say our challah business was like 90% puns. So
That's a good time. That's a
yeah.
really good time. I'm, speaking of all these flavors, now that I'm hungry, speaking of all these flavors, Sarah, I'm curious, when it comes to like your when it comes to like your choice of like what flavor you want, like, yeah, it's one thing to just like, oh, I want to experience this specific type of pleasure in my taste buds this tonight. That sounded really weird, but you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
when you when you decide on which flavor of challah you want, like, is there a deeper symbolism in that as well, or is that just happenstance? Like, oh, I'm just trying to enjoy a certain flavor tonight to pair this with my chicken or my vegan chop liver, whatever it is, right? What that's a thing. It's really good, by the way.
I mean, I would assume, yeah. Um, I mean, for me, like personally, one of the things that I love doing is talking to whoever my guest is going to be, and finding out if they have favorite foods or flavor combinations, and then creating a challah recipe just for them. Um, I love that. Like one of my friends, she loves like chocolate covered strawberries. So I took like freeze dried strawberries and like blended them up so they were like a powder, and I like put
Mhm.
it in the flour so it got this like pink color, and put like chocolate in it. So for me, it can also be a way of welcoming people to your table, and making it special for them. It can also be like for Thanksgiving. I'll do a pumpkin spice challah, and we're entering pumpkin spice season. So I'll do like a pumpkin spice challah. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's more so about like intentionality, celebration, and delicious flavors than it is necessarily about symbolism, unless you consider, you know, welcoming a friend, and that sort of symbolism.
Wow, very cool. Something I just want to add to this conversation as well, is so there's blessings you do for the bread, and I'm speaking as someone who just came from yeshiva a little over a month ago now,
Mm.
which I miss it so much because the
Mhm.
Aish yeshiva in Israel was amazing. So I learned this while I was in Israel. Um, you mentioned manna before, right? We were traveling the desert 40 years. At some point, we didn't know how to make food for ourselves because we were slaves all that time. So God literally dropped bread from the sky. But we didn't call it bread, we called it manna. And that's
Mhm.
why that's like one of the reasons you brought it up earlier, right?
Mhm.
So there's first the bracha beforehand, right? It's the hamotzi, right?
Mhm.
Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lahemin haaretz, right?
Mhm.
So we say that typically, but here's the translation, which is really interesting. It's blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brought forth bread from the earth. So it doesn't even acknowledge in that blessing the sky, right? But
Yeah.
it talks about it come from there. That makes sense though, because we get it wheat from the ground. It comes from the earth, right? So it's
Mhm.
this miracle that's really given to us. By the way, you ask anybody, I bet anybody listening to this will say that of all the ways to consume food, of all the things that you can consume, bread is probably one of their favorite things to include in their meal.
Mhm.
But after that, you have the Birkat Hamazon. And the Birkat Hamazon is this huge bracha. It's this huge blessing. I have it, right there in my siddur, right?
Oh my God. I grew up going to Jewish summer camp. Like Birkat's like one of my, I bang on the tables. I yell inappropriate things that rhyme with the Hebrew. It's my favorite.
Oh yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. I said I would do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
But now as I'm growing towards a modern Orthodox life, I learned, that bracha is what we did at summer camp was the extremely truncated version. And there's actually like 5 other paragraphs beyond that. And that part doesn't have any melody. And you just read it straight through. Yeah. And when I look at it, I'm reading it. It's something I had to ask one of my mentors about this. Like, how come it doesn't talk about bread for these next 5 paragraphs? It's just talking about moments that we've suffered, different tragedies we've experienced. And what he basically explained was that throughout the 40 years that we were lost in the desert trying to get home, we experienced all these terrible things that took place. But the one thing that stayed consistent throughout that time was bread. So I thought that was just a really cool idea that, oh man, like you have to, like when you eat bread, yes, it's pleasurable, it's enjoyable. But you also have to remember that bread is also part of what kept our sanity, throughout the traumas that we've had throughout our entire generation, throughout many, many years of trauma. This is where we've come today. This is where we're at. And so bread has always stayed a central part. And that's why bread is actually one of the most important foods that you can eat symbolically and on a holy level, on a spiritual level, when it comes to your meals. So I thought it was really interesting. Fun story that they taught me in yeshiva was some people think that the Birkat Hamazon, you have to say it for every meal. And that's not true. You only say the Birkat Hamazon for when you eat bread, right? So if you ate a salad with like apples and walnuts and had some tofu in it, you do not have to say the Birkat Hamazon. It's a separate, much shorter, much more easy bracha for that, right?
Yeah.
But there's apparently a kid in yeshiva. This is years ago, right? There was a kid in yeshiva who got really sick, and he wasn't showing up to classes, and he got very sickly. And someone came up to him. One of the rabbis approached him in his dorm where he wasn't coming out of bed. He's like, "Why are you sick? Are you okay? Do we need to send you home?" He goes, "I haven't eaten for 4 days." "Why haven't you eaten?" "Because I don't want to do the Birkat Hamazon. I'm just so tired of it." It's like, and the rabbi said, "What do you mean? Why wouldn't you eat? I don't understand." He says, "If in order for me to eat this apple, I have to say Birkat Hamazon." It's like, "No, you don't." No, you don't. You don't have to do that. What are you doing? And so that's how I learned about something called homotsophobia.
Oh my God. Homotsophobia.
Homotsophobia is real.
Oh my God. I believe it.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe it. I keep thinking about what you were just saying about challah and like trauma and like the last 5 paragraphs and all of that. And I think like one of the beautiful things about Jewish wisdom is this idea of there's always darkness and light and always, light and darkness. And I love that, like, yes, challah is so delicious, but it's also like the one thing during traumatic times. And so like, I just love that it, like what you were speaking to is that it can hold both like beauty and, love from God and all of these things. And it can also be the only damn thing that was good when everything was really bad.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. There's that classic question. Do Jews keep Shabbat, or does Shabbat keep the Jews? Have you ever heard that little riddle? Yeah, it's this riddle that I've heard a few times. Not just in the traditional spaces, but I've heard it debated before. Like going back to your phrase before, you brought up 2 Jews, 3 opinions, right? And it's like I really do think that Shabbat has kept the Jews. That I think is acknowledged throughout our history, is that even in the death camps of the Holocaust, even in the concentration camps, Jews still kept Shabbat. Jews still kept the holidays. It remained there all this time. So Shabbat will outlive the Jews in a way. Thus, Shabbat keeps us, in my opinion. That's my opinion on it. There's probably other people who will say, well, you need humans to keep Shabbat. And that's true, you do. But
I mean, like one of the the story goes like one of the first things that like, once we were, free from slavery, that it was like, that's when Jewish time began. Like, right. That was when I was like, okay, you will mark time.
The first mitzvah we ever did. That's right.
Right. It's like marking time. And I think with Shabbat, it's like, that is part of us marking time. And one of, I think, the common misconceptions, I think for some Jews, but like mostly non-Jews, is that like, Hanukkah is our biggest holiday because it's like around, Christmas and everything else. But like reality, like Shabbat is our most important holiday. I mean, someone can, argue because again, there's lots of opinions, but yeah, from where I'm sitting, Shabbat is really the most important holiday. And so I love the discussion of like, does Shabbat keep the Jews? Do Jews keep Shabbat?
Yeah.
I would argue it's both.
Yeah, right. It's definitely a relationship. Sarah, before we end your episode, I need to know on a practical level, first of all, what are some basic ways that someone can start learning about how they can make challah? And also, what is your personal favorite challah?
Ooh, okay. Ways that you can start learning about making challah. You can go to ChallahHub.com. We have tons of recipes on there, and they're written with sort of a quirky voice, so they're also moderately entertaining to go through. But there's a bunch up there. There's one with egg. There's vegan ones. And my favorite challah, woof, that's hard. And it's not like I haven't been asked that question before. And every time I think it changes. I would say our turmeric, my turmeric everything recipe is one of my favorites.
Wow.
It's like savory, but not too savory that you can eat it with like anything that's on your table. But yeah, I would say give me a delicious turmeric everything challah any day of the week, but especially on Fridays.
Sarah, I love it. Love your energy. Love your enthusiasm. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for taking on this challenge. I really do appreciate it. I learned a lot about challah this specific episode, and I want to thank you for being on the show. And to the listeners, please do go to badjew.co. Please buy our merch. Please do leave us a review as well. All these actions can help support the show so we can continue creating episodes like this, to continue to create a central place where there's no such thing as a bad Jew. The one and only podcast that I've seen so far that interviews Jews of all backgrounds, 17th largest Jewish podcast in the world. Please help us continue to grow and expand. And to the listeners, we'll see you next episode next Wednesday.
Shalom.